Hey everyone, it is Sean and we are back with our Push Talk. Today is October 7th and we are back, James, with a very hot topic. Today I have the great James Henderson on my left. You're my left and right on the screen. And we have a new employee of ours with us. Her name is Hope Jones, and she's going to be sitting in with us today talking about critical race theory. So just to give a brief scenario of what's going on with CRT. CRT is a program that has actually been around in school systems for over 40 years. It teaches about how racism is embedded within our criminal justice system, within our systems, period. And it's become a hot topic this year. James?
Yeah. Well, from what I've gathered, officially organized in '89.
Yeah.
And then, but the precursor of that dates back to the '60s and '70s. So, I mean, it's, 40, 50 years of systematic through the education system, and having this race, being involved in education in such a way that, for lack of a better phrase, disenfranchises a select group of people.
Right.
Particularly African Americans.
But this is the thing about it, right?
Or people of color, sorry.
This thing about it for me is like, it talks about, the whole purpose of critical race theory is to talk about how racism is embedded within our system, right? First off, let's do the first question. Is that a lie? What do you think? It's definitely not.
Absolutely not.
And you come from the criminal justice system.
Say, no, absolutely not. It's been there since before I was born, since before you were born. Like, it's been there. That's just something that I think has always been such an issue, and people always just tend to fight the truth. It just doesn't make any sense.
But it's most of the people who you see protesting it are not African American people. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's people of other races. But I don't understand. So how do we argue that we need to talk about the history of America, but we want to exclude a whole portion of history? It was funny because I was watching, I think it was at Howard University, Dr. Cornel West wrote a scathing article because Howard University had decided that they were going to stop teaching about, I think it was the Civil War or something. It was something about white culture basically within their program. And he was like, that's not what education is all about. Education is about literally you give me all the details, and it's for me to make a decision in my mind of what's right and what's wrong.
Right.
And I think that, the same people who are arguing that we need to stop being so critical about certain things that we allow, like there's been people who have been banned from going to schools, and these same people have gone on and said you shouldn't ban them for giving an opinion. But
right.
It's when it's only the opinion you like that we need to teach. No, I want to learn about the opinions that I don't like. I want to learn about the opinions that I do like, and let me make a decision on what's right and what's wrong. It's not for me to pick and choose what the information I get, and then
I remember hearing that in the state of Texas, they've been changing the history books and excluding what I learned, or what most of us in this room have learned as far as slavery was concerned. I was in Williamsburg, and in Williamsburg there is a museum where they teach up there, and it shows the life of colonial and slavery and
they have a
whatnot.
whole park dedicated to it.
Absolutely. And in that park, one of the things that they were teaching the kids, and one of the educators came back to me, and he came back in disgust, and I was like, why are you looking so, why you all frowned up? And he said, they're telling these kids that that African Americans came basically on their own accord, and that they were migrants, and that they were sold the goods of the products from the fields, and took it to market to sell, as like they made that choice on their own, when actually all of that took place through slavery.
Right.
And so when you start erasing
boats and bringing us over here,
right.
People jumping off of boats, killing themselves. The reality is that I don't understand why, when it comes to the topic of race, and it's not all race, it's the topic of black race.
Yes.
That America seems to not want to look at the wrong of black race. Like, we think that just because we approved the voting rights and we gave black people the right to vote, that killed race, right? Mm-hmm. We think that just because of the fact that we have amended our Constitution to say that African Americans are no longer slaves, that gives us right. But the part that we miss is that it says that that in our Constitution that we're not allowed to have slaves, except for in the case if a person, I think Carol was talking about this, except for in the case literally of if a person does something wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And then it would be justified as slaves, right? So people who are locked up in prison, by law, the Constitution gives them permission to be used as slave laborers. Hence the reason why people who are locked up in prison, they're making fried cups. She was telling us what fried bowls from McDonald's, right? They're making ice cream for these ice cream companies. They're making tags in California. Yes. And they're making 4 cents to 5 cents an hour. And then on top of the 4 to 5 cents an hour, they're then turning around and saying, oh, but you need to pay us for you being here. And so it's like, once again, that's slave trade, right? Yeah. There's no way of just because you give me a cent doesn't mean that I'm still not a slave. Who works for 4 cents? Right. And they're doing manual labor. So it seems like America gets in an uproar when it comes to talking about black slavery and racism and how unjust the criminal justice system is, how we can look at so many black and brown people who have been overly sentenced by this criminal justice system. I mean, we can look at people right now who are literally out here who are not getting jobs based upon the color of their skin or how they dress or how their hair is. There's people, listen, I remember when I first came into management, I had a white manager who said, listen, if a person comes in here and they don't look the way that you think they should look, then don't hire them. And I used to watch him literally, kids were coming there with dreads, and at the time I had just cut my hair, right? But there were people who come in there with dreads, with twists in their hair, and he would never hire any of them, all because he didn't like the way they looked, right? We have to, at some point, if America's ever going to get over the skepticism of racism, we have to deal with the reality of what it has done to our society and what it's doing to our society. That is correct. And it's still impacting us today. And the bad part is that we talk about cultural differences. We kind of talked about it yesterday with Reverend Shannon Jones, right? Yes. About how we have to go back to the core of cultural differences. It's almost like America wants us to forget our cultural difference, right? So that we don't, so our children don't know, they don't understand what slavery is, right? They look at a world where they think they're free, but they don't understand that, hey, the moment you make one mistake, the system's going to show you how free you really are, right? They don't understand that, right? And it's even, and even as parents, definitely in the black culture, because of the fact of the older generation remembering what the past was, we've tried to protect our kids from actually knowing the past versus teaching them and making them walk through it. Like, I was having a discussion with somebody recently, and I thought that they needed to chastise their child in another way, right? I mean, their grandchild, whatever, in another way. And they were like, well, I can't do that because my mama never did that to me, and I got to love them, I got to love them, I got to love them. Yeah, I get you got to love them, but the Bible says that God chastises the ones he loves. That doesn't mean that you don't love them. It means that she needs to, that person needs to learn from some of the things that you've been through, some of the mistakes you have. It's not enough to try to cover up everything that we've done and say, okay, well, I've lived a perfect life. Just because you live in a perfect life now doesn't mean that people don't need to know about your dirty past. Right. Because it plays a role and it kind of helps to lead and guide. I mean, when we have white kids who are sitting in Paulding County here in Georgia, going down using a sink and saying, oh, never home with that. I mean, don't raise their kids, black people. Always out looking for another baby mama, black people. And this is a video that was actually on YouTube in Paulding County of students. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's something that is taught. That's something that people are raised up in, right? And it's so for white America to say to me as a black man that we don't need to continue to talk about your history, but you know what? We need to talk about our history. We need to keep up Confederate statues or keep up Confederate flags. Oh, go somewhere with that. Because if I can't sit around here and throw my fist up to represent black pride, then bring down every statue that you have of Robert E. Lee, and then we can talk. Bring down Stone Mountain. Take Confederate generals
chisel it down.
Right? And then we can talk. Until then, CRT needs to be taught in schools. We not only need to learn about CRT, we need to learn about slavery. We need to know how slaves got over here. We need to learn about how Americans got over here. We need to learn about the Civil War, whether or not we agree with it or not. I need to know who Robert E. Lee was, right? Whether or not I agree with him or not, because if I don't know my history, then I can't fix the mistakes of the past if I don't understand what the past was.
Yeah. And he was a slave owner.
He was a slave owner. Jefferson, man.
Yeah.
Jefferson was a slave owner, but he was, and then the bad part is that you cannot talk about racism without talking about rape, right? Because we know that there were women who were like literally black women who were married during that time, who the slave owner would have an attraction to and bring her into the house, and would sometimes sleep with them in front of their husbands. And there was nothing that you could absolutely do about it. Right? We can't talk about slavery without talking about murder, right? Because they were killing people for the fact of wanting to learn how to read. Right. Or learning to try to read, or trying to. I mean, we can't. And even from the church perspective, we can't get so far away from the cross that we forget that we need to sing every once in a while. I'm going down by the river. Why? Because that teaches kids that back during that time, you wasn't able to say, "Hey, I'm getting up and I'm going to church at 285 Merchants Drive." You had to sing a song and walk it out, and that's how you spread the message across. That hey, if we're gonna meet and we're gonna try to do this, let's go down by the river, right? It was through a song. Most of our kids don't know that. They think that when they hear "let's go down by the river," they're up like, well, I might want to hear that old song. Right. But that old song has so much history to it. Right. So we take away our history, then we take away who we are.
Well, but that's how the system is designed, and they're trying to continue to press that particular, to push that particular agenda. And you said something about what the laws and Constitution and everything, how it's all set up, but it brings to mind that it may or may not have been officially written to and designed specifically against a certain group of people or Black Americans, right? However, the implementation and the understanding of said law is what the problem is. What we're dealing with is what the problem is. Because you're looking at one law and applying it two different ways, right? When it comes to, and that's where a lot of us are, why most African Americans are having issue with, is because in all, you say you want to have equal rights and equality. This is a country that is fair and equal, but you don't implement the rules in such a manner.
But it's funny because I find it interesting when we talk about like police violence, right? Mm-hmm. A white cop kills a black person, everybody's in an uproar. Every fraternity out there comes out to that white cop's side, right? Mm-hmm. Every police fraternity comes out to the white cop's side. Black cop kills a black man. Where are the police fraternities, right? Again, you see it happening like all the time, every day. And this is something that, it's a touchy subject for me because I have tried, when it comes down to even Black Push, to try to rebrand to where, I want people to understand that, yes, I care about Black issues. I'm not going to apologize for that. I care about Black issues. Let one of my brothers and sisters be beat down the street. Like Vernon Jones said, that blood won't be on my hands. If I see it, I'm going to say something about it, right? But at the same time, I care just as much if I see a young man being killed by a Black police officer or a white police officer. To me, that's still an injustice. And what the funny part about, let me say this another way. The funny part about America is that we won't deal with it until we start to see how the systemic racism and the systemic issues is now starting to affect our community, right? So I love my Asian brothers and sisters, right? And they stood with us plenty of times. Let's not get me wrong, they stood with us plenty of times. But it became a big issue in their community when it started coming on into their own neighborhood, right? When we began to see Asian brothers and sisters being beaten up and treated a certain kind of way, all because we had a leader who tried to tie them into how COVID got here, right? But that's when it became an issue for them. And again, I'm not knocking them because that's who we are that's who we are as a world. Like, I hear that your mom passed. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Right? All right. Let my mama pass. My whole world is over, right? But I couldn't feel that when it was your situation. Mm-hmm. But when it becomes to my own territory, it becomes totally different. It becomes so real to me. Right. And we have to start, I'm just speaking for Americans, right? If we're gonna be America, this country that we always talk about, one of the things I love the term when I hear people say America is a constant work in progress, right? We still haven't got it together. I respect that, right?
Right.
Because what we're trying to do is something that has been untested. We see other countries trying to do it, but it's still a very much untested process, right? But if we're going to be in America that's for everybody, we have to start feeling that same pain. Like, who can look at George Floyd being killed and say that was justified? The first person who told me about it was not like the person you would expect to be like Ryan or you. It was a white woman who worked in the office with me who was very much politically disaligned with me. Mm-hmm. And when I walked into the office, she said, "Did you see the video of the guy who got killed?" I said, "No." And she showed it to me. She's like, "That cop needs to ride," right? That was her reaction. But until we have that same reaction across the board for every situation like that, whether the person's white, whether the person's black, whether they're Hispanic, whether they're Asian, whether they're Haitians at the border who are trying to come over here to find a better place for themselves, then we as a country, we're going to always miss the mark. I mean, even now, there was a thing about, who was it? Fred was telling us the other day, Fred Swan was telling us the other day, how there was a bill that passed the federal government to wipe away the debts of every black farmer. I think either in the state of Georgia or across the nation.
Country.
And white farmers got upset and started complaining about it and saying, well, our debts need to be written off too. And now the whole bill is being held up in the court because of the fact that it was but how many bills have they passed that only impacted white America? That black people did not get up and get routed for it. So again, CRT is one of those things, is like 40, 50 years now, this has been the school system, right?
Yes.
Now all of a sudden it's such a big deal. And why would it be such a big deal at a moment where George Floyd has happened, Breonna Taylor has happened, Trayvon Martin has happened? All these things happen now because you know about it a little more. You know what I'm saying? Now because of the fact that one person found out about it going on in the school district, and they went on Facebook and made like all these conspiracy theories about it. Right. It's all about teaching slavery and how it got engrafted into our system. It's very much engrafted in our system.
Absolutely.
The way people are sentenced in our country, it's engrafted. The way our students are suspended and expelled from school, you can look at and racism and see it in there. So I mean, for me, people who don't like CRT, kick rocks.
Yeah.
I have to agree with you.
and you know I'm not this controversial. Disco, you know I'm not this controversial.
But the fact remains is that this is some stuff that has taken place, and we were talking about how when you come from a diverse school, and if you're all for diversity, and really you have to actually walk the walk.
Right.
If you really are for diversity. If you're not for diversity, that's fine. I mean, that's your opinion and you know how you feel about things. But the fact remains that the one thing that you are trying to eliminate from a quote unquote diverse schools, you're trying to eliminate something that helps make your school diverse to begin with.
Right.
So how does that? Where do we go with that? I mean, so how do we make the necessary changes? What can we do?
Well, I feel like in that situation, it's going to be hard to try to fix that, honestly. Like, people are not going to accept the ugly truth, because that's really what it is.
Yes.
It's the ugly truth. Nobody wants to accept the fact that all these things happened back in the day, and then now we're just getting to a point where it took for all of this to happen just for people to speak up. Because people been speaking up for years, right? But it's not until this point where visually we had to see a man get stepped on his neck. Mm-hmm. Visually, we had to see a girl get dragged out of her car from being pulled over. Like it's things that I feel like people across the board, they've seen it and they've heard about it possibly, but like now it's in your face.
Right.
So what you gonna do about it?
Right.
What are you gonna do about it? We can't sit here and just talk no more. You can walk, you can protest, but like who's gonna go in the office and vote? Who's going to sit here and try to put up, a situation, that's trying to get a bill dropped? No, something. Because the people from my generation, like even when I said before that I did come from a diverse school, I had a kid when I was in middle school who literally had pointed to a Confederate flag and said, "Are you offended?" This is me in grade school. And I honestly, I'm a kid. I don't even know that much about that situation. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't up until when I went to my historical black college when I was like, oh, I should have probably slapped him. But, I was like, wow. No,
because then you'd have been another stat and just
right.
Instead of you being a probation officer, you would have been on probation.
See? But see how I wouldn't have known what to do in a situation like that, because one, I'm a woman, and then two, I'm a black woman, and this is a white boy who did something so small as that. You know, like I literally, I just didn't know what to do in that situation. So I feel like throughout the years, it's changing, but it's gonna take more.
Right.
It's gonna take more.
Right.
What were you about to say, Ryan?
You might not hear me no way, don't worry about it.
We can.
Oh, I'm loud. No, I was going to tell you, when I coached in the high school in 08, I had made a big deal because they had a thing called SSI, indoor suspension.
Okay, school suspension.
But what they did was they put these minority kids, because I coached football out there. So when you go to that particular room, it was just either Mexican or blacks.
Right.
But the catch was they had them in a room with no windows. And they had a desk facing the walls. So all day long they sat and looked at the wall. That's all they did. So I raised HELL because I told her, I made a big deal about it. Because I said, now you're putting a mind frame getting used to going to jail. Because in jail ain't no windows.
Right.
So now they're not going to be afraid of nothing, what I took out of it. But you already put in a mind frame. This is what, I mean, they literally sat there at a desk and looked at the wall for the whole school day. So I made a big deal. I told their parents, take the outdoor suspension. Don't take indoor suspension. Tell them you want your child's outside suspension, not indoor suspension. So they can, because that's crazy. To me, what's where I'm looking for, Sean, y'all help me out, is like you getting them ready for,
Institutionalized.
yeah, you getting their mind
that's what they
frame
come
ready for
to.
that type of environment.
Yeah, you know, with ISS and OSS, like, I agree with you. If your child gets suspension, go ahead and go with the OSS. And the reason being is, if they're willing to take your child, if they're willing to put your child out of school for whatever the issue might be, okay, the reason why they do ISS is because there's still money attached to that child being in school for that particular day.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. So,
Yeah, less about the child.
right.
That's the number.
Because you take
me, I
that
know
you
I
put
spend a
you
lot of
put
time
them in
in ISS.
you put them in ISS, and then they have to suffer with being, you know, doing their homework or whatever, and being by themselves, isolated for the rest of the day.
Back home, ISS for us was, we had to pick up the trash in the
Yeah, work.
hallways.
It
We
was
had to pick up the cafeteria,
But
tray.
even then,
Yeah.
We
even
wasn't sitting in a
It was
room.
work.
even then, that's not right.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
it
go
ain't
to
right.
school. I don't go to school to learn to pick up trash.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't go to school to learn how to clean up the school walls, right? I get it. Now, if you were a child who vandalized the school, yeah, you need to clean up your mess, right? That's different. But the thing is, though, I remember back in the day when I was in elementary school, when you got suspended from school, they didn't send you home. They didn't keep you in school. They sent you to the church. They had a program set up at the church to where literally that's where you would go and you would be attended to, right? But that's what they used to do in Fort Lauderdale. Like, they literally had a church that they partnered with, and you would go to that church, right? But at that church, you knew it was gonna be different because you're still gonna get the schoolwork from school, and you're still gonna be able to do it there. Not only did you have somebody there, you had somebody there who was able to talk to you about, hey, why did you even do that?
Right.
What was going through your mind while you were doing it, right? Instead of dealing with the issues, again, going back to dealing with the issue, CRT is about dealing with the issue of racism, about dealing with the issue of racism being embedded. We can't expect it to change, and maybe that's the reason why people are so upset. They don't want it to change.
Right.
They don't want it
Right.
to be. They don't want it to be pulled out of our system, because if you educate people on it, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, if you're human, something about you will connect to the fact that, you know what, there's something not right about this.
Right.
There's something not right about, and it's not just. But the thing is, though, once again, when the other parts of America start to realize that ultimately what's embedded in our system, even though it may impact the large community of one group today, ultimately it's going to leak over, and there's going to be a leak somewhere in that system,
Yeah.
and it's going to start impacting your child and your household. And when they get that, that's when it is.
Speaking of the system, the problem with the system is, for real, we got these old-fashioned teachers. They have not got adapted to the way of life now. Like when I was coaching football in this high school, I was getting phone calls for a kid just walking in limping, like with the swag, or just in the chair, or the lingo. They was getting in trouble for their lingo, for their body language, because these are teachers that's back in 1960s who feel like that's inappropriate or that's being tagged. You know, it's so much that I told the kids stop wearing jerseys to school, because they were getting labeled as a thug because they wore jerseys to school. You know, or their hair twisted. because they had twisted hair going to East Cobb, they was already focused and been a thug. So the system is bad because they're not hiring teachers who are up to date of the world the kids living in now. So our kids keep getting labeled.
But I can somewhat go with you, right?
Yeah.
But I have no problem with teachers who are old school going back to the core of what respect is, right? It's disrespectful. I'm 33. I cannot stand walking behind a child, whether they're white, black, and this is not just black kids, it's every race, with their pants hanging down, and I have to look at their boxer briefs. That's disrespectful.
Of course.
But yet, if you say something to somebody's child, don't say nothing to my child, right? But at the same time, that same person who say don't say nothing to their child,
ain't taking care of their child.
no, but it's not even that. If that child get in trouble, they're gonna call Black Push. They're gonna call somebody like us and be like, "Hey, can you go to court and help my child get out of trouble?" Once again, though, it goes back to the whole aspect of learning our history. There's a documentary. I mean, not a documentary. There's a guy from a spiritual community. His name is Craig Lewis, I think, and he preaches a whole title of a series called Hip Hop, the Antichrist, and about all this stuff, right? And he talks about music, but he also points out like the original image of what a thug was, right? And what a thug was back in the time, like back in the day, it was people who would go rob people and they would steal all their jewelry. Yep. And they would take all their jewelry, and what they would do with the jewelry is they would put it in their mouth, and they would put it all in their mouth, and the rings and stuff in their mouth, the diamonds in their mouth, and they would go out and, they would open up their mouth and they would show all this jewelry, right? Again, not knowing the history of that, I think that's cool now, right? And then we get upset when we sit around here and wonder, like, why my baby act like a thug? Maybe because you let him call in the spirit that he don't even understand that he's calling into your home, right? Again, I mean, we got the issue. Let's deal with the issue. The issue is that slavery was a big part of America. The issue is that even till today, we have given reparations to Native Americans because we came over and took their land. But what about the people you took from their land and brought them over here as slaves who, again, built most of this nation on their back? And it's not just African Americans, Latin America. I mean, there was a guy, because they're getting ready to build a museum for the Hispanic community, right? Hispanics were here before what we call America was, right?
Right.
They were here. I mean, think about it. Texas used to be a part of Mexico. Florida used to be a part of Spain, right? They were here before we were. And for us to sit around and say now, like, that they have no right into the land, or we don't want them here, is ignorant. Because once again, just like African Americans, they have given their blood, their sweat, and their tears. We got to remember that most of the time, like how we, and even as black people now, right? It's so funny because I hear black people like, "Oh, I would never go out and pick cotton." Fool, your ancestors was out there picking cotton for plenty of years, right? And now we look down on Mexicans and stuff like that, on their race, because we're like, oh, well, we need them over here because we need them to pick cotton. No, we need some of y'all black people to go out there and pick some cotton too. Why? Because I want to go and I want to use Q-tips. I want to go and I want to get a blanket from the store. We use cotton for those
That's right.
jeans, right? We use that for that issue. We got to the point where we think that, first off, why is it so important for me that we teach CRT? For as a culture, I need to understand where I come from. And it humbles me to realize that, you know what, I'm no better than the next man. I'm no better than the garbage man. I'm no better than the people who work on farms. I'm no better than the person who work in a restaurant. I'm no better than any of them, because in my bloodline, that's where I come from, right? I come from a bloodline that worked hard, that busted their behind, that did not give up. That even when somebody told them what they could not do, they still persevered. They still went out there and marched. Even when people told John Lewis, don't cross that bridge, what did he do? He still went and crossed that bridge anyway, because he understood that even though I may lose my life crossing this bridge, what I'm going to do is going to impact the generations back past me. I talk to some kids now. I'd be like, I'd be like, I met Congresswoman Nikema Williams, and she took over John Lewis's seat. They were looking at me like, oh, okay, that's great. Then the next question they asked me is, who was John Lewis, right? And it's like, again, and I'm 33. That's a 20-year-old child. Just think about how much history I have not gotten yet, right? Think about how much history your generation didn't get yet. And then too, part of it too is, if they do take CRT out of school, who cares? Because it's the black family's obligation to teach black
home.
history in your
Yes,
home,
sir.
right? And that was one of the things, like when people used to always be like, get all bent out of shape, like, oh, now they don't ban praying in schools, children can't pray. Listen, if you're a Christian, you can't stop me from praying in school. I remember right for the FCAT, they had just banned it in Florida. I put my head down and I said a prayer before I do that. And nobody could stop me from doing that. There's certain things that we get all bent out of shape about, but even if they take CRT out of schools, that don't stop me as a parent, and I'm not a parent, but they don't stop me from as a parent or uncle from being able to sit down with my nephew and saying, hey, let's talk about Vernon Jones. Let's talk about Martin Luther King. Let's talk about John Lewis. Let's talk about all these different people that we celebrate. Let's talk about Harriet Tubman.
Right.
Let's talk about James Henderson. Let's talk about Ryan.
Right.
Ryan has a past. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about these things that are going on in our black community each and every day. And we have an obligation to do that in the homes too. So for black people who are upset about CRT and them trying to take it out of school, well, why don't you get a book and try to teach your child yourself?
Well, it's not really the black. It's not the black
library.
It's not the African American community.
They don't know.
Google.
That's why I wanted out of it.
But it's not the African American community that wants it out of the schools.
I know, but
If you're gonna teach it right.
No, but it's not even that. It's not even that the African American people want out of school. We can still. It doesn't have to just be in school, right?
Right.
It can be in our homes too.
Yes.
One of the things I love about Dr. Sherman Scott, remember when we met with him in the park?
Yes.
Day? He was like, one of the things I do with my boys is that I bring them books home about African American history, about Hispanic history, about Asian history, right? And I allow them to read the books and make their own interpretation in their head of what's right and what's wrong, right? It doesn't just, see, a lot of what the problem is, and just our society in general, the problem with the cultural breakdown, the problem with the cultural breakdown is we are dependent on other people to teach what our cultural background is,
Right.
period,
Right.
We don't want to educate ourselves on it, and we don't want to educate our children on it. So, like, again, if we really want to make a difference when it comes to CRT, educate yourself and start educating everybody around you. It's kind of like, it's the same thing when we think about the Bible. The Bible says that we're supposed to take the word and not just hold the word into ourselves,
Right.
but take the word and share the word with other people, right?
That's right.
It's the same thing. Like, we have to understand that God he's so funny that he doesn't just do it one way in the Bible then expect us to live differently in the world. Like, it's supposed to all connect, right? It all connects. The way we do it, the word, we're supposed to do it, everything in our culture, and we're losing our culture because we don't understand it ourselves. And we're expecting people to teach it who don't want to teach it. Obviously, look at Williamson County. There were teachers in there saying like they don't want to teach that, right?
Right.
So imagine a teacher getting out there like, okay, today we're gonna talk about
Because they feel
critical.
like it's
know
too
it.
much.
But it's not that they
Yeah,
don't
like
know
they-
it.
they-
Some
it's
of
too
them
much
know
for
it.
them.
Some of them know it, but they don't care. Once again,
Right.
It's not impacting their community.
Okay, time out real quick. Do you remember Willie Lynch letter, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember when my son came home doing history, right? And it was their Georgia history. So I told him to go back to school. I said, why don't you tell a teacher to tell y'all about William Lynch? I got a phone call the next day from the school.
She didn't know what it was about.
Going off, they wanted to suspend my son because he asked teachers about that. And all I said, and I got to disco mode, I went off. I said, if you're going to teach my child history, teach him everything.
Right.
Just don't teach him Georgia history.
Right.
So if y'all want, and this during Black History Month.
Wow.
I said, let them read the Willie Lynch letter and let them do how they feel about that letter or what they think the letter means. And we're going to go history.
Right.
So I have to go down to the school so my son won't get expelled so they know I'm the one told my son to tell them that.
But see, we don't have a lot of parents that do that. The fact that you even were, you stood up and said, no, something's wrong here, you need to get this, and this, we have to do that more.
Like
we have to influence more
correct,
parents to
same
want to
school.
do that.
Yeah, same school told my son that Christmas was not on December 25th. It was on some kind of day, some star.
Oh.
I lost my mind.
Yeah, I mean, but
He was a different religion, one of them across the East religions.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look here, man, I went to school raised in HELL. What your religious belief is ain't got nothing to do with you teaching my son.
Right.
You teach my son what's in that book,
Right.
but you don't tell my son when
Something
Christmas
else,
is,
yeah.
because you don't know we teach him at home.
Right.
But if you don't,
But see, then that argument may be something that's used to justify, the other side, right?
Yeah.
Again, if we're going to teach history, we teach it all. If we're going to teach, and you can't have the argument that, okay, well, I want you to know my history and what I believe,
Correct.
but not be aware of the history of other people and other
Correct.
cultures. So one of the things that really humbled me one time, I was in the Dominican Republic, and I had a picture on my screen of of me and Jesse Jackson. And this guy who was like my tour guide, he looked at my phone screen. He was like, "Who's that? Your dad?" And I was like, "No, that's Jesse Jackson. You don't know who Jesse Jackson is?" He was like, "No." I said, "Well, do you know who Barack Obama is?" He was like, "Yeah." I said, "Do you know who Donald Trump is?" He said, "Yeah, I know who Donald Trump is." I said, "But you don't know who Jesse Jackson is?"
Right.
He was like, "No." And it made me realize in that moment, that's what's history to me. It's not history to other people in other countries.
Right.
And even when I went to London, like I'm looking around like, where's the statue of George Washington? Where's the statue of Martin Luther King? Their history is different, right? And if I'm going to educate myself and I'm going to be a citizen of this world, I have to understand that there's other religions, there's other faiths out there. I have read the Quran. I have read different types of books from different religions. I have. Why? Because of the fact that it didn't change my view of Christianity. If anything, it just influenced more of why I believe in what I believe in. I do believe when I go to other countries, like I do believe in touring their country. I believe in like going on the history things. I want to know about Notre Dame, why it's so important. I learned about Notre Dame, like literally that about King, what's his name? The king of France. Everybody knows his name, but one of the kings of France literally bought the throne of crowns from the Roman Empire that was on Jesus' head, simply because of the fact that he wanted his people to actually believe that he was the chosen king by God. So he bought the throne of crowns to just prove that point to them. Until today, well, hypothetically, until today, that throne of crowns that was originally on Jesus' head is still held at Notre Dame in France, right? In Paris, France, right? Most people don't even know that, and most people didn't even know that until the fire broke out there recently.
Right.
So it's, again, knowing that history is bigger than just America. America's not the only country
That's
here.
right.
America's probably one of the babiest countries out there, right?
Absolutely.
We haven't been here forever, but what our history is embedded in other, and what makes America, you know what, this is like a speech, right? What makes America so great and what gives America so much potential is that we have something that most other countries don't have. We have the ability to know about other cultures and know about their history because we are so diverse. And for us to try to throw that to the side, for us to try to whitewash it, for us to try to not take advantage of the privilege that we have, to be able to have people who are here from Cuba and be able to learn about their Cuban history, to be able to have people here who are from Haiti and be able to learn about their Haitian history. Most countries don't have such a diverse melting pot where we can learn about all these different cultures because they're all here, right? They're all here. We can learn about the Indian culture because they're here. We can learn about the Asian culture because they're here, right? And we see it because even if you go to New York, we got little Chinatown, we got little, you know what I'm saying? All these different things that makes us so great. Other countries you go to don't have that. Right. And if for us to try to whitewash it or try to dismiss it, I think we do a great injustice to ourselves as a nation and ourselves as a people. And that's all I'm gonna say. That's it. I'm over it.
Well,
critical race theory.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, we this whole topic right here really has touched a nerve as far as I'm concerned for me. You know, just I think, in fact, I even will go back that I didn't know it was being called critical race theory when I heard about the issue and the history books in Texas that they were making those changes. I didn't know that's what it was being called or that it became labeled as. But I was bothered then, and this was several years ago when I first heard about it. And today, to see how far that agenda has been pushed and where we are with it today. And it's going to continue to grow in that matter, and we have to definitely be able to, we as family members in our own households have to be able to go back and teach our children, because we are the first teachers in our households. We have to be the ones to do the teaching first. And if you don't do a whole lot of reading, if you're one of those parents that don't do a whole lot of reading or never did, you got a cousin, auntie, sister, brother, somebody in your family does. And we need to get out there and use the other villagers to help us, where we do not always have to depend on others outside of our community to teach us.
Right.
because that's wherein lies part of the problem.
You know, it's funny. I'll end by saying this. You know, we watched the movie Pocahontas so much, right? And one of the parts about Pocahontas I love is that you used to see the ancestors, and the ancestors was the one who taught the classes. They were the ones who taught the kids about their history, about what was going on. Where are our ancestors? Where are the voices at now? And the ancestors, when I refer to ancestors, I'm not referring to people of older age. Where's the church? Where are people who are leaders in our community actually speaking out on some of these issues? And we see these videos, and if you don't see us there represented, we're arguing about it online, we're writing an article about it, we're posting on Facebook, or we're doing it on Twitter, but we're not in the meetings, right?
Right.
And I always say this, that there comes a point where we have to stop yelling in the megaphone and sit down in the room and actually hold a discussion with somebody. Because that's where Martin Luther King, yes, he was great at a megaphone. He was great. Give him a mic, he'd tear it up. But he also understood that there was a time where he had to stop ripping Lyndon B. Johnson in public and sit down with Lyndon B. Johnson in the Oval Office and actually have a discussion about how we move things through, right? We need both. We can't do one without the other. And we have some people who are yelling on megaphones just to be seen and to make a name for themselves. Definitely in the social media generation, that we don't have people who are willing to sit down and have discussions with people anymore. And that's what we're going to miss out on. And we're going to lose a whole generation because of it.
Yeah. So that leads us into learning how to become ancestors ourselves.
Absolutely.
And filling that void. When you mentioned it, the first person that came to mind was Dick Gregory. You know, an ancestor in our modern times. So, that makes, and looking back on his topics, and some people may not like the way he phrased it, but truth is truth.
Truth is truth. Well, it was a good discussion today. I mean, I never get this passionate about anything, but just today it was on point, critical race theory. But we want to just remind everybody, remember to check in with us every day at 1 p.m. We have different guests who are here. Thank you, James, for coming up with this topic today. Thank you, Hope, for being willing to join us today on your first podcast, and welcome to the organization.
Yes.
And thank you, Disco, for giving your input today, because it's very rare we get Disco to come on podcast. But remember, everybody, we have a whole bunch of different events coming up. Please continue to go to our website at www.blackpush.org to find out what we have going on and what we have coming up. And stay blessed.